7 hours. 7 hours in the dark of a medical tent, with the fate of the most hunted man in the world in my hands. The media called in Spectre, the architect of terror. To me, he was just a body bleeding on a gurney. The order I received over the radio was short and brutal. Let him die. It was what everyone wanted. It was the justice we had been promised. But the truth I discovered that night, with a scalpel in my hand and his pulse refusing to stop, is that monsters aren't born from nothing. They are manufactured. And we were the fucking factory. What they told you about this war is a convenient lie. The secret that man whispered to me, moments after I broke every protocol to save him, almost cost me my sanity. This story isn't about heroes and villains. It's about the gray area between them, a place where I've lived for too long. If you want to know what really happens in the shadows, far from the cameras and official speeches, listen very carefully. The truth has a weight. I've carried it alone for years. If you have the courage to know what we became to hunt our enemies, subscribe now and comment the word protocol below. I need to know I'm not alone in this anymore. Let's begin. The order came over the radio. I remember the crackle, breaking the silence of that never-ending night. The voice on the other side was flat, lifeless, as if reading a grocery list, not dictating the end of a man. Target hit, codename Spectre. Your function, Doc. Observe and confirm expiration. Do not intervene. Confirm expiration. That's how they talk. Clean language for a dirty reality. Like canceling a newspaper subscription. Not like a man's soul was leaking into the sand, 50 meters from where I stood in the communications tent. The smell of dust and old coffee, the sharp hum of the equipment, it all seemed to penetrate my skull. I just nodded to the radio operator, a kid not even old enough to drink, and walked out. Every step towards the medical tent was heavy, purposeful. The gravel crunched under my boots in the dense silence of the base. The moon, cold and indifferent, drew shadows that looked like claws on the ground. In my head, I repeated the litany, the justification. This is the architect of the Cora attack, the man who filled children's coffins. I am not an executioner. I am the final punctuation. I am the hand of justice. I told myself that. I believed it. This was the reason. The reason for the training, for the distance from home, for the constant smell of antiseptic and fear. I would be one of the good guys. I would see justice happen with my own eyes. Then, the entrance to the tent, a heavy flap that opened to a smell no training prepares you for. The metallic, hot scent of blood, mixed with the chemical, sterile smell of iodine. And there he was. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a legend whispered in fear down the halls. He was just a man. A thin man, bleeding on a field gurney. An ugly, irregular hole in his chest. He seemed smaller than I had imagined. The stories, the reports, they create giants. Reality often presents us only with broken men. And the only sound besides my own breathing was a beep. Faint, irregular, the metronome of death, a stubborn pulse on a monitor, an electronic protest against the inevitable. He didn't look like a demon. He looked like a patient. In my oath, the reason I wear this uniform was to save patients. But my order was to watch this one die, to stand there, a silent witness to the last breath of the specter. And for the first time, the title of good guy felt hollow. A lie I whispered to myself in the dark. The beep continued, faint but insistent. And I just watched. Time, in that place, time was a strange thing. It stretched and shrank. And in that tent, it stopped. The minutes dragged on, turning into an hour that felt like a lifetime. And the beep continued, faint, stubborn, a silent protest coming from that gray machine. The bleeding had slowed, almost stopped on its own, but the pulse refused to obey. Command expected nature to take its course, but nature, it seemed to be on his side. Outside, the hum of the generator was a constant drone, the soundtrack to our own little private war. I remember seeing a lone fly, buzzing through the tent and landing on his sweaty forehead. And he didn't move, didn't blink, nothing. And yet, his heart beat. I found myself staring at the monitor, almost mesmerized. Each beep from that machine wasn't a sign of life. It was an accusation, a silent question directed at me. And now, doctor? And now? I wanted it to stop. In a dark corner of my soul, I screamed at him, die. Just die and set me free from this. But the other part of me, the part that took an oath, it was at war. My eyes moved from the green glow of the monitor to my own hands. Hands I looked at every day, but which suddenly seemed to belong to someone else. Hands trained to stop bleeding, to suture, to clamp, to save. Hands that knew what to do even when my mind was lost in the fog of protocol and fear. The Hippocratic Oath, which I had taken years ago in a room full of young idealists, echoed in my head. In that tent, under the cold light of the surgical lamp, it sounded like a mockery. The cold steel of the instrument tray, it seemed to call to me. I could feel the sweat pooling inside my latex gloves, a sticky, uncomfortable sensation. What was I, after all? A doctor? Or an executioner waiting for the clock to strike the right hour? They weren't there. Command, the voice on the radio. They were just ghosts miles away. In that tent, there was only us. A man who refused to die, and a doctor who was being ordered to watch. It was an order on the radio versus a heart that was beating, and the heart was winning. That's when the decision made itself. The world around me disappeared. The hum of the generator, the smell of blood, the voice of command. It was all gone. My hand moved, steady, and picked up the scalpel. Its weight in my palm was familiar. comforting, an extension of myself. The sharp sound of the metal lightly tapping against the steel tray was the only noise. The first cut was precise, silent. A red line opening under the bright light, like a sad smile. The smell of fresh blood, stronger now, filled the air. And a thought, clear as crystal, cut through all the confusion. To hell with the protocol. To hell with command. I am a doctor. This is what I do. And then, silence. A silence deeper and louder than any explosion I had ever heard. The bleeding was contained. The beep from that machine, once a metronome for death, was now a steady beat. Stable. A fragile promise, but a promise nonetheless. I placed the bloody scalpel on the tray. The click of metal on metal sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the tent. Beside it, the dog tags I had taken from his neck. His name. Proof that he was real. Proof of what I had done. My hands trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was exhaustion. An exhaustion that came from the soul. I had fought against an order, against my training, against death. And I had won. I did it. I saved him. I broke every rule, ignored the chain of command, risked everything. But I saved him. The smell of clotted blood and iodine was the only real thing in the world. And the question, which didn't come in words but in a wave of cold that shot up my spine, what the hell have I done? That's when his eyes opened. I expected anger, hatred, fear, anything. But there was nothing. Just a deep, worn-out emptiness, like the bottom of a dry well. The eyes of a man who had already seen the end of the world and no longer cared. He gave a faint nod, an almost imperceptible movement, an invitation to come closer. His mouth opened, his lips pale and cracked, but no sound came out. Just a harsh wheeze, the sound of torn tissue trying to work. Is he going to curse me? I thought. Spit on me? What could he possibly want to say that was worth so much effort? I leaned in, my face inches from his. The smell of his breath was foul, the smell of the death I had just driven out. And then he whispered. The words were no more than a scratch in his throat, a sound like sand scraping on glass. He told me a date, the day of the attack on Cora, the day that started it all, and then a name, the name of one of ours, a colonel, a man who had greeted me at the base last week. His voice was a thread of sound that wrapped around my brain. An excuse, he whispered, and every syllable was agony. We needed an excuse. The floor of the tent seemed to ripple beneath my feet. The hum of the generator outside returned, but now it sounded different, threatening. I backed away from him, stumbling. My gaze fell on the tray, on the scalpel covered in his blood. The steel seemed to shine under the lamp's light, physical proof, not of my skill, but of my complicity. No, it can't be. We are the good guys. We are justice. We are, aren't we? The truth hit me like shrapnel in the chest. I hadn't just saved a man. I hadn't saved the enemy. I saved the living proof that we We were the monsters. Returning was the most painful part. There are no words in our language that can stitch the edge of that experience. Imagine floating in the warmest, most luminous ocean that exists. A place where you are not you. You are just part of everything. And suddenly, an invisible hook snags you and pulls you down into the darkness, into the density, into the mud. It was a crushing weight, a pain that was not of the body, but of the soul itself being forced into a mold too small. The weight of flesh, of bones, of identity. The weight of gravity, which we never notice, but which there, on the way back, became a monstrous force crushing me. Every atom of my being screamed, protested, begged not to return. And then, the cold shock of reality. The first sound, a beep. But it wasn't the faint, stubborn beep of that tent in the desert. No, this one was different. Clean, rhythmic, indifferent. And then, muffled voices, the shuffling of shoes on a smooth floor. The smell, it wasn't of dust and blood. It was the chemical smell of sterilization, the smell of a hospital. When I opened my eyes, the light assaulted me. A fluorescent light, white, gold. I blinked and the world came into focus. The white ceiling, the IV stand beside the bed. I felt the rough sheet on my skin and the thin, irritating tube in my nose. I was back. The weight of the world had reclaimed me. For days, I didn't say a word. How could I? What words would I use? I felt the weight of everything. The weight of the blanket on my legs. The weight of the plastic spoon in my hand. The weight of the gazes full of a concern they didn't understand. But beneath all that weight, there was a calm I had never known. That knowledge, the peace I brought back with me, was an anchor in the storm. The horror of that revelation in the tent, the lie, the betrayal, all of it had been washed away. As if a giant pure wave had swept through my soul, leaving the beach clean. And on the clean beach, the truth remained. Not the dirty truth of men and their wars, the greater truth. I understood, in that place where time is a joke, that the fear of death is the greatest thief of life. We spend our days building walls, hoarding treasures, holding grudges, all to protect ourselves from an event that is, in fact, a door, a graduation, a homecoming. And that's why I needed to tell this. That's why I'm talking to you now. Yes, you who are there, listening to the tired voice of an old man. I want you to feel, if only for a moment, the peace I felt. I want you to understand something I had to nearly die to learn. Life here, this life, is the breath before the dive. It's the lobby of the theater, and we treat it as if it were the main show. We cling to grudges, to resentments. We build empires of pain around words that were said in the heat of the moment, of things that were done by people who were also in pain. And for what? I saw what really matters on the other side of the curtain. And it's not the medals they hang on your chest. It's not the battles you win. It's not who was right or who was wrong. There is only one thing you take with you. A single thing that has weight and value in the economy of eternity. It's the love you gave. And just as importantly, the love you allowed yourself to receive. It's everything. It's the Alpha and the Omega. And I'm not talking about the romantic love we see in movies. I'm talking about the love that forgives the unforgivable. The love that looks at someone who hurt you and chooses compassion over revenge. The love that sees the light of God even in the eyes of an enemy. The love that serves a glass of water without expecting a thank you. If I could give you a single gift, a single treasure for my entire journey, it would be this. Find the courage to forgive. Now, not tomorrow. Forgive your parents for their flaws. Forgive your children for their independence. Forgive yourself, above all things, for not being perfect. Just let it go. Drop the weight of those stones you carry in your pockets. They are not yours, and they cannot pass through the door that we all, one day, will walk through. Don't be afraid. Please. Live with an open heart. Love without measure. Cry, laugh, feel everything. And when your time comes, and it will come for all of us, you will understand. It will not be an end. It will be a reunion, a return home, a peace that your mind cannot even begin to imagine. It is there, waiting for you. Simply believe it.